My son's viral post declaring me a toxic mother got shared 10,000 times and destroyed my reputation overnight. But when his employer called asking why he was listed as my emergency contact at the company where I worked, he suddenly went silent. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The morning I became the internet's most hated mother started like any other Tuesday. I was sitting at my desk in the medical records department, entering patient data with the same careful attention I'd given to everything in my 43-year healthcare career, when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Ruth. "Margaret, what is happening with David? This is all over Facebook." My coffee grew cold as I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the words that seemed to reshape reality with each reading. My son, my David, had written a manifesto about surviving maternal abuse that painted me as a monster I didn't recognize. My name is Margaret Henderson, and for 68 years I've lived by simple principles: love freely, give generously, and never keep score with family. Those principles guided me through 39 years of marriage to my late husband, Robert, through raising 3 children on a nurse's salary, through double shifts in the cardiac unit when the mortgage was due and the kids needed school supplies. I'm the woman who learned to patch drywall myself because we couldn't afford repairs, who clipped coupons religiously to afford piano lessons for my daughter, Sarah, who sold her mother's jewelry to pay for David's therapy when his anxiety became unbearable in high school. In my neighborhood in suburban Pennsylvania, I was known as the casserole lady. When Jennifer Miller down the street was diagnosed with breast cancer, I cooked meals for her family 3 times a week for 8 months. When the Rodriguez family lost their home to a fire, I organized the church fundraiser that raised $12,000. Every Tuesday morning, you'd find me at the food bank, sorting donations and packing boxes for families who reminded me of my own during those lean, early years. My refrigerator door was a monument to love, covered in grandchildren's artwork, graduation photos, and a magnetic frame holding the last photo of Robert and me before the cancer took him. David had always been my sensitive child, the middle one who felt everything more deeply than his siblings. While Sarah charged through life with determination and my youngest, Michael, floated through with easy charm, David struggled. He'd call me at midnight, anxiety rattling through the phone line, and I'd talk him through breathing exercises I'd learned specifically to help him. When his first marriage crumbled, he'd moved back home for 6 months, and I'd held him while he sobbed, like the 10-year-old who'd once been bullied for being different. When his second wife left, claiming he was too needy, I'd refinanced my house without hesitation to help him keep his apartment and maintain stability for his weekend visitations with his daughter. The sacrifices never felt like sacrifices. That's what mothers do. When David needed therapy but couldn't afford it with his insurance, I paid out of pocket. When he wanted to switch careers from accounting to graphic design at 35, I supported him emotionally and financially through 2 years of school. I attended every portfolio showing, praised every design, celebrated every small client he landed. Just 6 months ago, at his 38th birthday dinner, he'd stood up in the restaurant, raised his glass, and announced to everyone within earshot that I was the strongest woman he knew, that everything good in his life came from my unwavering support. My part-time position at the hospital where I'd spent my entire career wasn't about the money anymore. After Robert's life insurance and my pension, I could have managed. But the routine gave me purpose, and the extra income meant I could slip $100 bills into birthday cards for my grandchildren, could say yes when David needed new computer equipment for his design business, could donate generously to the church building fund. My supervisor, Dr. Patricia Kim, often joked that I should teach a master class in dedication. "Margaret, you've given more to this place than anyone could ask," she'd say. I'd smile and tell her the same thing I'd told Robert when he worried I was doing too much. When you love what you do and who you do it for, it's not work. But now, sitting at that desk where I'd organized thousands of files with meticulous care, I was apparently a toxic narcissist who had emotionally crippled her son. According to David's post, my love was manipulation, my support was control, and my very existence in his life was the source of all his struggles. The woman who'd spent sleepless nights researching anxiety treatments, who'd driven 4 hours round trip every week during his custody battle to watch his daughter, who'd never missed a single important moment in his life, was suddenly the villain in a story viewed by 10,000 strangers who were congratulating him on his courage to escape. My days had developed a comforting rhythm over the 5 years since Robert passed. Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, I'd wake without an alarm, my body still trained from decades of early hospital shifts. I'd pad downstairs in my worn terry cloth slippers, a Mother's Day gift from David 3 years ago, and start the coffee maker, using Robert's favorite mug with "World's Best Grandpa" painted in crooked letters by my oldest grandchild. While the coffee brewed, I'd stand at the kitchen window watching the cardinals that nested in our oak tree, the same tree Robert and I had planted when we bought this house 32 years ago. The morning ritual included scrolling through Facebook on my tablet, the one David had insisted on buying, me last Christmas, preloaded with apps and bookmarks to make it grandma-friendly, as he'd teased. I loved seeing updates from my children and 6 grandchildren. Sarah posted daily motivation quotes and pictures from her real estate showings. Michael shared funny videos and photos from his construction sites. But David's posts were special. He documented everything with an artist's eye, from his morning latte art to sunset shots from his apartment balcony, often with captions thanking me for teaching him to see beauty in ordinary moments. 3 days a week, I worked at Jefferson Memorial Hospital from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. The commute was a pleasant 15 minutes through tree-lined streets I'd driven for 40 years. I'd park in the same spot in Employee Section B, say hello to Marcus the security guard who'd started the same year as me, and make my way to the 3rd-floor administrative offices. My desk, positioned near a window overlooking the memorial garden, was organized exactly how I liked it. Color-coded files on the left, a small framed photo of my family on the right, and a ceramic pot of African violets that Dr. Kim swore only I could keep alive. The work itself was methodical and soothing, converting paper records to digital files, updating patient histories, ensuring HIPAA compliance, tasks that younger employees found tedious but I found satisfying. There was something meaningful about preserving people's medical stories with care and accuracy. During lunch breaks, I'd often eat in the hospital cafeteria with Janet from legal and Dorothy from pediatrics, friends who'd weathered decades of hospital politics and personal storms together. We'd share pictures of grandchildren, complain good-naturedly about new computer systems, and plan our monthly book club meetings. Tuesdays meant volunteering at the food bank from 3 to 6 p.m. I'd been doing this for 15 years, long enough to see families cycle through hard times and recover, to watch children I'd once handed juice boxes to return as teenage volunteers. The director, Paul Washburn, called me his secret weapon because I could organize the donation room faster than anyone else and had a gift for making anxious first-time clients feel comfortable. David had recently designed new flyers for the food bank pro bono, his way of supporting my volunteer work. "My mom's a saint," he told Paul. "Least I can do is make sure people know about this place." Thursday lunches with David had become sacred since Robert died. We'd meet at Antonio's, a little Italian place halfway between his apartment and my house. He'd order the chicken parmesan, I'd get the soup and salad combo, and we'd split a piece of tiramisu. These lunches were when David really talked about his design clients, his dating disasters, his worries about his daughter Emma growing up too fast. I'd listen more than I spoke, having learned that David processed out loud, needed to verbalize his thoughts to understand them. Sometimes, he'd sketch ideas on napkins while talking, and I'd save dozens of these napkin drawings in a box labeled David's Dreams. Sundays were family dinner days, a tradition I'd refused to let die with Robert. The house would fill with the smell of pot roast or roasted chicken by noon. Sarah would arrive first with her twins, always bringing a store-bought pie she'd apologize for not making herself. Michael would come later with his wife and their teenager, usually after a morning soccer game. But David made Sunday dinners special. He'd arrive early to help cook, documenting the process with his phone, calling it the Margaret Henderson Cooking Show. He'd post photos of the spread with captions like, "Nobody does Sunday dinner like Mom," and "This is what love tastes like." Evenings were quiet but full. I'd tend to my small vegetable garden until dusk, growing the tomatoes Robert had loved and the herbs David requested for his amateur cooking experiments. After dinner, I'd FaceTime with Emma, helping her with homework or listening to her middle school dramas. I'd text goodnight messages to all three of my children, a habit started when they left home and never abandoned. David always responded with a heart emoji and "Love you, Mom." Before bed, I'd read in Robert's old recliner, usually mysteries or biographies. Sometimes the design magazines David brought me so I could understand his work better. This was my life, ordinary, purposeful, and built entirely around the love I had for my family. Every routine, every tradition, every small daily act was threaded through with the quiet satisfaction of being needed, being useful, being loved in return. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but it was mine, and it was good. The first crack in my carefully ordered world appeared on a Wednesday evening, exactly 3 weeks before everything shattered. I'd called David around 7 p.m., our usual check-in time when I knew he'd be winding down from work. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, sweetie, just calling to see how the Morrison project is going. I'm making that chicken tortilla soup you love for Sunday. Call me back. Love you." I wasn't worried. David often worked late on design deadlines, losing himself in creative flows where hours passed unnoticed. But Thursday came and went without a return call. Friday, too. By Saturday morning, a small knot of concern had formed in my chest. I called again, leaving another cheerful message about finding his father's old architecture books in the attic, knowing how he loved incorporating vintage design elements into his work. When Sunday dinner arrived and David's chair remained empty, Sarah noticed my repeated glances at my phone. "Have you heard from David?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while passing the mashed potatoes. Sarah exchanged a look with Michael before answering. "He's been active in our group chat, Mom. He and Jessica are planning to visit that new art museum next weekend." The knot tightened. David was talking to his siblings but not returning my calls. Monday morning, I did something I'd never done before. I drove past David's apartment building on my way to work. His car was in its usual spot, the graphic designer on board sticker I'd bought him as a joke still displayed in the rear window. The lights were on in his third-floor unit. He was home. He was fine. He was just choosing not to call me back. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, debating whether to go up and knock, but something held me back. A voice that sounded like Robert's saying, "Give the boy some space, Margaret. He's 38 years old." At work, I found myself distracted, entering data incorrectly twice and having to go back and fix it. Dorothy noticed during lunch. "You seem off today. Everything okay?" I forced a smile and blamed it on not sleeping well, but the truth was that David's silence felt different from his usual patterns. I knew my son's rhythms like my own heartbeat. When he was stressed about work, he called more, not less. When he was dating someone new, he couldn't wait to tell me about her. When he was struggling with Emma's teenage moods, I was his first call for advice. Tuesday's food bank shift brought unexpected information. Sheila Patterson, whose son went to high school with David, mentioned seeing him at the grocery store. "He looked good," she said while we sorted canned goods, though he seemed in a real hurry. I called out to him, wanted to ask about doing our company website, but he practically ran the other direction. She laughed. But I felt that knot transform into something heavier. David was never rude, especially to potential clients. He was the child who wrote thank you notes without prompting, who remembered everyone's names, who Robert had called our little diplomat. Wednesday afternoon, I broke down and texted Sarah. "Have you actually talked to David or just messaged? Is everything okay with him?" Her response took an hour, unusual for my prompt daughter. "He's been weird lately, Mom." Short responses, declined Michael's invitation to the game, maybe work stress. Want me to call him? I told her no, that I was probably overthinking, but my mother's intuition was screaming that something was wrong. This was the child whose emotional states I could read from the way he said hello on the phone, whose anxieties I'd learned to detect in the pause between sentences. Our Thursday lunch arrived like a test I was destined to fail. I arrived at Antonio's 10 minutes early, securing our usual table by the window. I watched the door, my heart lifting each time it opened, then sinking when it wasn't David. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Just when I was about to leave, he walked in. 20 minutes late, his phone already in his hand. No apology, no explanation, just a distracted, "Hey, Mom," as he sat down, eyes still on his screen. The waiter brought his usual without asking. David had been ordering the same thing for 5 years, but he barely looked up to acknowledge it. "David, honey, is everything all right? I've been trying to reach you all week." I kept my voice gentle, the same tone I'd used when he was 16, and clearly hiding something about a failed test or a party he'd attended. He finally looked up, and for a moment I saw something flash across his face. Guilt? Anger? It was gone before I could identify it. "Why do you always assume something's wrong?" The sharpness in his voice made me flinch. "Can't I just have a life? Do I need to report every single thing to you?" The words hung between us like a blade. In 38 years, through teenage rebellions and 2 divorces, David had never spoken to me with such coldness. I reached across the table for his hand, the same gesture that had comforted him through countless anxious moments. He pulled away as if my touch burned, his hand disappearing under the table. "I'm not hungry," he announced, standing abruptly. "I have to get back to work." He was gone before I could respond, leaving me alone at our table with 2 untouched meals and a dozen worried stares from other patrons. I sat there for another 20 minutes, not eating, not crying, just trying to understand what had just happened. The waiter, young and awkward, asked if I wanted boxes. I said yes, paid for both meals, and left David's favorite tiramisu untouched in the dessert case. That night, I lay awake reconstructing every interaction with David from the past month, searching for clues I might have missed. The mind has a peculiar way of rewriting history when you're desperate for answers, and mine was working overtime to explain away his behavior. Maybe he was seeing someone new and wasn't ready to tell me yet. He'd been secretive about relationships before, especially after his second divorce, or perhaps work stress was worse than I knew. The design industry was competitive, and David had mentioned losing a big client last month. By 3 a.m., I'd convinced myself that this was just another one of David's cycles, the emotional waves I'd learned to navigate since he was young. I remembered his junior year of college when he'd cut me off for 3 weeks during final exams, only to show up at my door sobbing about the pressure, apologizing for shutting me out. Or during his first divorce, when shame had made him avoid me until I'd shown up at his apartment with groceries and unconditional love. David processes pain by pushing people away, Robert had observed years ago. But he always comes back to you, Margaret. You're his safe harbor. Those words became my mantra as I finally drifted off to sleep near dawn. Friday morning, I made a decision. I would give David space, but I wouldn't disappear. I'd continue reaching out in small, non-invasive ways that let him know I was here when he was ready. I sent him a photo of the sunrise from my kitchen window with a simple, "Beautiful morning, love you." No response, but I saw the read receipt. That tiny read notification became my lifeline. At least he was seeing my messages, even if he wasn't answering them. At work, I threw myself into a complicated records migration project, grateful for something that required my full concentration. When Dr. Kim commented that I seemed especially focused, I laughed it off. "Just enjoying the challenge," I said, not mentioning that work was the only place where my mind stopped spinning theories about David's behavior, During lunch with Janet and Dorothy, I kept the conversation on their grandchildren, their vacation plans, anything but my own family. When Dorothy asked about David's design business, I gave my standard proud mother response, the words automatic and hollow. Saturday morning, I did something that felt both natural and somehow wrong. I baked David's favorite cookies, the brown butter chocolate chip ones his grandmother had taught me to make. The familiar rhythm of creaming butter and sugar, the smell of vanilla and melted chocolate, temporarily soothed my anxiety. I packed 2 dozen in the tin he'd given me one Mother's Day, the one decorated with vintage botanical prints, because he knew I loved gardening. I drove to his apartment, my heart hammering as I climbed the familiar stairs to his unit. I could hear music inside. Fleetwood Mac, the band we'd bonded over during his teenage years. I knocked gently, then louder when there was no response. The music stopped. I could sense him on the other side of the door, that maternal radar that tells you when your child is near. "David, honey, I brought cookies. I'll just leave them here for you." I set the tin by his door, touched my fingers to the wood as if I could send love through the barrier between us, and left. An hour later, Sarah texted me a photo from David's Instagram story, the cookies on his counter with the caption, "Adulting is hard when your mom still knows your weaknesses." The casual cruelty of him sharing this with everyone but me stung, but I focused on the positive. He'd taken them inside. Sunday dinner felt emptier despite Sarah and Michael's families filling the dining room with their usual chaos. Sarah kept shooting concerned glances between me and David's empty chair. Michael tried to lighten the mood with stories from his construction sites, but even the grandchildren seemed to sense something was off. "Where's Uncle David?" my grandson asked. "He promised to show me his new drawing tablet." I smiled and said he was busy with work, the lie bitter on my tongue. After everyone left, I packed up David's portion of pot roast in the containers I always used, the glass ones he preferred because he said food tasted better in them than plastic. I left them on his doorstep with a note, "In the fridge within 2 hours. Love, Mom." That evening, I called my sister Ruth in Florida. "I think I'm overreacting," I told her, explaining the situation while minimizing the hurt in David's voice, the coldness in his eyes. "You know how sensitive he is. Maybe I've been too involved. Maybe he needs more independence." Ruth, who'd known David since birth, wasn't buying it. "Margaret, that boy adores you. Something else is going on." But I wasn't ready to hear it. "He's finding himself," I insisted. "He's 38 and still figuring out who he is outside of being my son. That's healthy, right?" I doubled down on normal, on routine, on faith that this would pass. I continued my morning texts, kept making his portion of Sunday dinner, maintained our Thursday lunch reservation even when he didn't show. "He'll come around," I told myself while tending my garden, pulling weeds with perhaps more force than necessary. "He always comes around." I even defended him when Michael called, concerned about his brother's behavior. "David needs space," I said, the words becoming a shield against the growing fear that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my son. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Robert's side of the bed felt especially empty, I couldn't maintain the facade. I'd curl up with David's baby album, tracing photos of his gap-toothed grin, his first day of kindergarten, his high school graduation where he'd pulled me on stage with him because he said I deserved the diploma too. "Where are you, my sweet boy?" I'd whisper to the pictures. "What happened to us?" The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was folding laundry, finding strange comfort in the mundane task of matching socks and smoothing wrinkles from pillowcases. My phone lit up with my niece Emma's photo, not David's daughter Emma, but my brother's youngest, a sweet 23-year-old who'd just started her first teaching job in Ohio. I answered with genuine warmth, grateful for family connection, even if it wasn't from the family member I most wanted to hear from. "Aunt Margaret, are you sitting down?" Emma's voice carried a nervousness that immediately set off alarms. I lowered myself onto the edge of my bed, still clutching a half-folded towel. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" There was a pause, the sound of her taking a steadying breath. I'm really confused about something. Maybe it's nothing, but Mom said I should call you directly. It's about David and some things he's been posting on Facebook. Have you seen them? My laptop was downstairs, but something in Emma's tone made me stay seated on the bed, as if standing might make whatever was coming more real. I haven't been on Facebook much lately, I lied, not mentioning that I'd been avoiding it since David started ignoring me, unable to bear seeing his updates meant for everyone but me. What kind of posts, honey? Aunt Margaret. I don't know how to say this, but he's been sharing articles about toxic parents and narcissistic mothers, like a lot of them, and he's writing these long captions about his own experiences. At first, I thought maybe he was supporting a friend or something, but she trailed off and I could hear her typing. I'm sending you screenshots to your phone. I'm so sorry. I debated whether to tell you, but if someone was writing this stuff about my mom, I'd want to know. My hands shook as I opened the text messages. The first screenshot was dated 5 days ago. David had shared an article titled, "When Your Mother's Love is Actually Manipulation," with a caption that began, "Finally understanding that what I thought was love was actually control." The second screenshot showed another share, "Breaking Free from Emotional Blackmail, a Survivor's Guide." His caption, 38 years of guilt-tripping disguised as motherly concern. No more. But it was the third screenshot that stopped my heart. David had shared a link to a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents, and he'd attached a photo of us from last Mother's Day. I was hugging him, my face bright with joy, while he smiled at the camera. But he'd written, "This photo makes me sick now, the performance of it all, the way she needed everyone to see what a good mother she was, the way I had to play along or face the consequences." Looking at this now, I can see my own fear behind that smile. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The towel I'd been holding fell to the floor, and I found myself on my knees beside the bed, not in prayer, but in shock. My mind couldn't reconcile the words with reality. Consequences? What consequences had David ever faced? I'd never even spanked him as a child, had never withheld love or support, even when he disappointed me. The most I'd ever done was express concern when he'd made questionable decisions, and even then I'd always followed up with, "But I'll support whatever you choose." With trembling fingers, I picked up the phone again and called Emma back. "Honey, I need to ask you something. Are these posts public? Can everyone see them?" Her silence was answer enough. "Aunt Margaret, they're all public. He's been posting stuff like this for about 2 weeks. The comments, people are calling you horrible things, strangers who don't even know you, and David just hearts their comments and thanks them for their support." I managed to thank Emma, to assure her I was okay, to ask her not to worry before ending the call. Then I sat in the gathering darkness of my bedroom, trying to understand how I'd become the villain in my son's story. I thought about calling Sarah or Michael, but shame stopped me. How could I tell them their brother was publicly painting me as an abuser? How could I explain when I didn't understand it myself? Finally, I opened Facebook on my phone, my hand steady now with a kind of resigned determination. I typed David's name into the search bar and went to his profile. There they were. Post after post, a carefully curated narrative of maternal abuse. Articles about gaslighting, emotional manipulation, boundary violations, each shared with personal commentary that grew more vitriolic with each post. The boy who'd once called me his hero was now calling me his biggest trauma. I read every word, though each sentence felt like swallowing glass. He'd twisted real events into unrecognizable shapes. The money I'd given him became financial manipulation to keep me dependent. The times I'd checked on him during his anxiety attacks became boundary violations and infantilization. My presence at his school events, which he'd begged for, was reframed as narcissistic need for attention and control. Even my weekly texts were weaponized as love bombing and emotional harassment. The comments section was a feeding frenzy of strangers congratulating him on his bravery sharing their own stories of toxic mothers, offering advice on going no contact. Someone had written, "Your mother sounds like a classic covert narcissist. They're the worst because they hide behind acts of service." David had replied, "Exactly. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see for so long." I scrolled through 2 weeks of posts, each one a public execution of my character, until I reached what seemed to be the first one. It was shared from a page called Healing from Narcissistic Parents, with David's comment, "Today begins my journey to freedom. No more silence, no more protecting her reputation at the cost of my mental health." It had been posted the day after our disastrous lunch at Antonio's. The post that changed everything went live on a Thursday morning at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because Janet from legal called me at 9:52, her voice tight with concern. "Margaret, you need to see what's on Facebook right now. Come to my office." I was updating patient files, lost in the familiar rhythm of work, the only place where David's rejection couldn't reach me. But something in Janet's tone made me save my work immediately and walk down the hall on unsteady legs. Janet turned her monitor toward me, and there it was, David's manifesto. Not just another shared article, but an original post, 15 paragraphs of carefully crafted character assassination. The opening line read, "After 38 years, I'm officially going no contact with my toxic mother. And here's why everyone needs to know the truth about Margaret Henderson." He'd structured it like a legal document, with numbered points detailing my supposed crimes. How I'd forced him to eat dinner with the family every Sunday. How I'd manipulated him into accepting money by refinancing my house without asking him first. How my constant presence at his life events was about control, not love. But the cruelest fabrication was his claim that I'd threatened to withdraw financial support during his divorces if he didn't let me control the narrative with his ex-wives. I had to read that 3 times, my mind unable to process the complete reversal of truth. I'd actually paid for his divorce lawyer both times, never asking for anything in return. "Margaret, it's been shared over 3,000 times since this morning," Janet said gently. "The local news Facebook page picked it up. They're calling it a brave testimony about breaking generational trauma." She showed me the WKBN news share with hundreds of comments from strangers in our community, people who shopped at the same grocery store, attended nearby churches, whose children had gone to school with mine. They were calling me a monster, sharing their own stories of narcissistic mothers, thanking David for his courage. The post included photos, carefully selected to support his narrative, pictures of me at his events, but cropped to remove his beaming face looking at me, a screenshot of my text messages, but edited to remove his responses begging for more contact, even a photo of the cookies I'd left at his door, captioned, "Still trying to love bomb me into submission." The tin that had once been a Mother's Day gift was now evidence of my manipulation. But the moment that shattered me completely was when I saw who had shared it. David had tagged Sarah and Michael, forcing them to publicly choose sides. Sarah had commented, "David, what are you doing? This isn't true, and you know it." His response, "I'm sorry you're still in the fog, sister. When you're ready to see the truth, I'll be here." Michael hadn't responded yet, but I could see he'd been active online, the green dot mocking me with its presence. By lunch, it had reached 10,000 shares. My phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from extended family, friends, coworkers who'd seen it. The food bank director called to check in, his voice carefully neutral as he asked if I needed to take some time off from volunteering. My pastor left a voicemail about resources for family reconciliation. Even the grocery store clerk who'd always chatted with me about her grandchildren couldn't meet my eyes when I stopped for milk on the way home. I sat in my car in the garage for an hour, unable to face the house where I'd raised this stranger who wore my son's face. The truth about David's betrayal came from an unexpected source. Janet had taken it upon herself to investigate, using her legal connections and research skills to dig deeper into David's sudden transformation. 3 days after the viral post, she called me into her office with a grim expression and a folder thick with printed pages. "Margaret, I need you to sit down for this," she began, her lawyer voice gentle but firm. "I found some things about David's recent activities that you need to know." She spread out the papers, screenshots from a website called Financial Freedom from Family Trauma, bank records she'd obtained through a friend, and most damning, a series of emails between David and someone named Trevor Kane. Trevor Kane, Janet explained, was a self-proclaimed life coach who specialized in helping adult children reclaim their inheritance from toxic parents. For $5,000, he offered a 6-week program that included scripts for going no contact, templates for social media posts designed to go viral, and most disturbingly, legal strategies for claiming power of attorney over elderly parents deemed mentally unfit. His website featured testimonials from clients who'd successfully liberated family assets, complete with dollar amounts that made my stomach turn. "David paid this man $5,000 6 weeks ago," Janet said, showing me the bank record, "the same week he started pulling away from you." The payment lined up perfectly with when he'd stopped returning my calls. But that wasn't the worst part. Janet showed me screenshots from a private Facebook group where Trevor's clients shared their progress. David had been posting there for weeks, workshopping his public accusation post, receiving feedback on which photos would garner the most sympathy, which words would trigger the strongest emotional response from strangers. In one exchange, David had written, "My mother owns her house outright, probably worth $400K now. Plus she has her pension and my father's life insurance. She keeps working part-time and giving money to charity when that should be my inheritance." Trevor had responded, "Perfect situation. Once you establish the narrative of abuse publicly, you can build a case for financial elder abuse. Claim she's not mentally competent to manage her assets. The public posts create a paper trail. Your siblings might even support you to avoid their own public shaming." My hands shook as I read David's response. "She's always been too generous, gives money to anyone with a sob story. That could work in our favor. Prove she's not financially competent." The casual cruelty of using my generosity as a weapon against me felt like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money. It was about destroying me to get it. Janet pulled out another document, a consultation receipt from an estate lawyer dated 2 weeks ago. "He's already met with someone about contesting your husband's will posthumously and claiming you unduly influenced Robert to exclude provisions for the children's inheritance. He's also inquired about declaring you incompetent based on excessive charitable giving and financial enabling." The conspiracy went deeper. Trevor Kane was already under investigation in 2 states for fraud, with multiple elderly parents filing complaints after their children had destroyed their reputations and attempted to seize their assets. The FBI was building a case, and David's name was now on their radar as both a victim and potential co-conspirator. He'd been recruiting other members from my church to join Trevor's program, earning a commission for each referral. "Margaret," Janet said softly, "he's been planning this for months. This isn't your son having a breakdown. This is a calculated attempt to steal your life savings by destroying your reputation so thoroughly that no one would question it when he took control of your assets." That night, I drove home from Janet's office in a fog, her revelations playing on repeat in my mind. The house felt different when I walked in. Not like a home, but like a crime scene where love had been murdered. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, seeing David everywhere. The kitchen table where he'd done homework, complaining about algebra while I made hot chocolate. The living room where he'd practiced his college presentations, nervous and eager for my feedback. The hallway lined with photos documenting 38 years of what I'd thought was real love. At 2 a.m., I found myself on the bathroom floor, Robert's wedding ring, which I still wore on a chain around my neck, clutched in my fist. The sobs came in waves that left me gasping, my body rejecting the truth it was being forced to accept. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Every sacrifice, every moment of love, every sleepless night caring for him was being rewritten as abuse. The son I'd carried for 9 months, whose first word was mama, who'd written me poems for Mother's Day until he was 25, had killed me in the court of public opinion for $400,000. I crawled to the closet where I kept the memory boxes, pulling them out with desperate hands. Here was the card he'd made at age 7. My mom is my best friend. She makes everything better. Here was his high school graduation speech where he'd thanked me for believing in him when nobody else did. The Father's Day card he'd helped make for Robert. Thank you for choosing the best mom in the world. Each artifact felt like evidence in a trial where I was both defendant and only witness to the truth. The cruelest moment came when I found the video on my phone. David's toast at my 65th birthday party just 3 years ago. I watched my past self beam as he spoke. Everyone here knows my mom would give her last dollar to help someone in need. She raised us to believe that love means showing up, means sacrifice, means putting family first. I'm who I am because of her love. The David on screen was crying as he hugged me. The David of today had weaponized those same qualities, calling them manipulation and control. "Where's my baby?" I whispered to the empty house, the same words I'd said when he'd hidden during thunderstorms as a child. But this time, no little boy would come running into my arms. I pulled out his baby album, tracing his newborn face with shaking fingers. That innocent child hadn't known he would grow up to destroy the woman who'd loved him first and most. "Where's my sweet boy?" I asked his first birthday photo, cake smeared across his laughing face, my younger self glowing with pure maternal joy. The breakdown deepened as I realized the full scope of my loss. It wasn't just David, it was every memory of him, now tainted with wondering if he'd ever truly loved me or if I'd been raising a stranger all along. The good memories hurt worst of all. Every "I love you" felt like a lie. Every hug seemed calculated. Had he been acting his entire life, or had Trevor Kane somehow replaced my son with this cruel stranger? Both possibilities were unbearable. I don't remember falling asleep on the floor, surrounded by photos and cards, my body finally giving in to exhaustion somewhere near dawn. On the 10th morning of my public humiliation, something shifted. I woke up in Robert's recliner where I'd been sleeping since the bathroom floor incident, unable to face our bedroom. The morning sun hit the family portrait above the fireplace, the one David had insisted we take last Christmas, now a monument to deception. But instead of tears, I felt something else rising in my chest. Anger. Clean, clarifying anger that burned through the fog of grief. I stood up, my knees protesting after days of barely moving, and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back looked defeated, gray roots showing, face gaunt, eyes hollow. "This isn't you, Margaret Henderson," I said aloud, my voice hoarse from disuse. "You survived 40 years of nursing, 12-hour shifts in the cardiac unit, holding dying patients' hands. You survived Robert's cancer, watching the love of your life fade away. You raised 3 children on a nurse's salary, never missing a mortgage payment, never letting them see you cry over bills." I thought of Sarah, who'd been fielding horrible messages from strangers about our family. Michael, whose construction crew had seen the posts and asked if his mother was really that psycho lady from Facebook. My grandchildren, who would someday Google their grandmother and find David's lies before they found the truth. Emma, David's own daughter, crying on the phone to Sarah, confused about why Daddy was saying such terrible things about Grandma. The moment of transformation came when I remembered something Robert had told me during his final weeks. "Margaret, you're the strongest woman I know, not because you don't break, but because when you do, you rebuild yourself stronger. Promise me you won't let anyone, not even our children, take away your dignity." "I promise," I said to his photo on the mantel. Then I picked up my phone and called Janet. "I want to fight back," I said without preamble when she answered. "Not dirty, not vengeful, but smart. Legal. I want to expose Trevor Kane and save other families from this. I want my grandchildren to know the truth. I want David to face consequences, even if it means losing him forever, because I've already lost him, haven't I? Janet's relief was audible. Thank God. I've been waiting for you to say that. I've already started building a case file. Next, I called Sarah and Michael, asking them to come over immediately. When they arrived, I looked different. Showered, dressed in real clothes, my back straight. Your brother has declared war on me for money, I said simply. I'm going to show you the evidence, and then we're going to make a plan. I won't ask you to choose sides, but I will ask you to stand for the truth. Sarah grabbed my hand. Mom, we already chose. We choose you. We've been waiting for you to be ready to fight back. Michael, usually the joker, was serious. Mom, David's not the brother we knew. Maybe he never was. But you're still our mother, and what he's doing is evil. We're with you. For the first time in 10 days, I felt like myself. Not the grieving mother, not the public victim, but Margaret Henderson. Survivor, fighter, protector of truth. David wanted to erase me for money. Instead, he was about to learn what happened when you backed a good woman into a corner. Let's get to work, I said, pulling out Janet's folder. We have a conspiracy to expose. Janet's conference room became our war room. She'd taken a personal day to help, and by noon, we had transformed the space into a command center. Sarah brought her laptop and marketing experience. Michael contributed his network of contractors who'd been following the drama, and I provided what Janet called the evidence goldmine. Years of meticulous record-keeping that would prove David's lies were exactly that. First step, Janet announced, spreading out bank statements. We document everything. Margaret, I need every receipt, every canceled check, every text message where David asked for money. I'd always been a keeper of records. Robert used to tease me about my filing system, but now that habit would save me. I produced 3 years of bank statements showing David's constant requests. $2,000 for design software, $5,000 for his apartment deposit, $15,000 for his divorce lawyer, $8,000 for Emma's private school tuition he couldn't afford. Sarah gasped when she saw the total, $127,000 over 5 years. Mom, I had no idea. But the real shock came from the text messages. David's phone had backed up to our family cloud before he'd removed himself, and I had screenshots of hundreds of messages. Mom, I'm desperate. Please help. You're the only one I can count on. I promise I'll pay you back when the business takes off. Each one date-stamped, proving he'd begged for the money he now claimed was manipulation. The second phase was investigating Trevor Kane. Janet had hired a private investigator who'd uncovered a gold mine. Kane was operating under 3 aliases, had been sued in California and Nevada, and was currently under FBI investigation for interstate fraud. More importantly, he left a digital trail, videos of him coaching clients to create viral moments of victimhood and establish public narrative before legal action. In one leaked recording, he literally said, "Remember, elder abuse laws protect them, but public opinion is your weapon. Destroy their reputation first, then take their assets while they're too humiliated to fight." Michael discovered something crucial through his network. Mom, David's been approaching your church friends, trying to get them into this program. But Tom Morrison recorded the whole pitch on his phone. David promised him a $500 kickback for each person he recruited. Tom, whose mother had helped raise funds for David's daughter's medical bills 2 years ago, was disgusted and willing to testify. But the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. David's ex-wife, Jennifer, called Sarah. "I've been watching this unfold in horror," she said. "Margaret was the only reason I survived my divorce from David. She paid for my lawyer, too, made sure I got fair alimony. I have emails where David admits his mother is too generous and jokes about it being his retirement plan. I'll testify to whatever you need." The fourth element was protecting my assets. Janet immediately set up safeguards, freezing any unnecessary accounts, putting alerts on all financial activity, and most importantly, updating all my legal documents with explicit language that disinherited anyone who made public false accusations against me. It's called a defamation clause, Janet explained, completely legal and increasingly common. The final piece required delicate timing. The hospital's annual employee appreciation dinner was in 3 days. David still worked there in IT. He'd have to attend or risk his job. The CEO, Patricia Kim, had already seen the posts and was furious about potential reputation damage to the hospital. When Janet informed her about David's unauthorized access to my personnel files, which IT logs proved he'd viewed multiple times seeking salary and retirement information, she was livid. "We're not going to destroy him," I said firmly, looking at my assembled team. "We're going to give him the chance to destroy himself with the truth." The 3 days before the employee appreciation dinner moved with agonizing precision. Sarah had crafted our counter-narrative with the skill of someone who'd spent years in real estate marketing, knowing exactly how to present truth in its most compelling form. She created a simple website, The Real Margaret Henderson Story, populated with photos, documents, and testimonials from people whose lives I'd touched. The food bank director wrote about my 15 years of service. Jennifer, David's ex-wife, penned a devastating account of how I'd supported her during the divorce David had caused through his infidelity. 17 church members contributed stories of quiet assistance I'd given over the years, medical bills paid anonymously, groceries left on doorsteps, college recommendation letters written for their children. But we didn't publish it yet. Sarah scheduled everything to go live at exactly 7:30 p.m. on Friday, right in the middle of the appreciation dinner. Meanwhile, Michael worked his own network. Construction workers, contractors, and tradesmen, people who valued hard work and straight talk, had been following the drama with disgust. Michael's foreman, Big Jim, had actually worked on my house's renovation years ago. "Your mom paid us extra when she found out my kid needed surgery," he told Michael. "Made us promise not to tell anyone. That's not a toxic person. That's an angel." Word spread through job sites across 3 counties. These were people who didn't usually engage with social media drama, but they were ready to flood David's posts with their own testimonies when the time came. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected development. The FBI contacted Janet. Trevor Kane had been arrested in a dramatic raid in Phoenix, charged with 23 counts of interstate fraud. The news wouldn't break publicly until Friday evening, but they wanted statements from Kane's recent victims. I spent 3 hours with federal agents, providing evidence of David's involvement. They were particularly interested in his recruitment, activities which elevated him from victim to potential co-conspirator. Dr. Patricia Kim called me personally Thursday evening. "Margaret, I need you to know that tomorrow night isn't just about your service award. We've discovered serious violations regarding unauthorized access to personnel files. Security will be present. David will have to attend. I've made it mandatory for all IT staff. I want you to hold your head high and receive your award with dignity. Let us handle the rest." Her voice carried 40 years of professional steel. She'd started as a nurse, too, had worked alongside me during the chaos of the 1990s healthcare crisis. She knew exactly who I was versus who David claimed I'd been. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in David's childhood room unchanged since high school, his debate trophies still on the shelves. Sarah found me there at 3 a.m. "Mom, are you having second thoughts?" I shook my head. "I'm grieving the son I thought I had. Tomorrow night I'll be burying him publicly. But he killed me first, didn't he?" Sarah held me while I cried one last time for the David I'd raised, the one who'd existed before Trevor Kane, before greed had poisoned him. Friday morning arrived gray and subdued, matching my mood. I went to work as normal, my colleagues treating me with careful kindness. Word had spread through the hospital about what would happen that night. The security chief stopped by my desk, squeezing my shoulder. "We've got you, Margaret. 40 years of service means something here." The IT department was notably quiet. David's co-workers avoiding eye contact when I passed their floor. At lunch, Janet made final preparations. The FBI had agreed to coordinate their press release about Kane's arrest to drop at 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes after our Truth campaign would launch. Local news, already following the viral story, would receive an anonymous tip about checking David Henderson's connection to Kane at exactly 8 p.m. The dominoes were lined up perfectly. Sarah and Michael arrived at my house at 5 p.m. to help me prepare. Sarah had brought a new outfit, an elegant navy dress that projected authority and dignity. "You're not going as a victim," she said firmly. "You're going as a survivor." Michael presented me with a small gift, a pendant containing Robert's picture. "Dad would be proud of you," he said simply. "He always said you were the fighter in the family." As we drove to the hospital, my phone showed 17 missed calls from David. He'd somehow sensed the shift in energy, the gathering storm. His final text, sent an hour ago, read, "Mom, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand. Please." Too late, I thought. You had 10 days to talk. 38 years of my love to honor. You chose public destruction instead. The hospital's event hall was packed with 300 employees and their families. David sat at the IT table in the back corner, his face pale, his usual designer clothes replaced with a wrinkled shirt. His co-workers had left empty seats on either side of him, a social quarantine that spoke volumes. He kept checking his phone, sweat visible on his forehead even from across the room. Dr. Kim took the podium at exactly 7 p.m. Tonight, we honor those who embody the true spirit of healthcare, dedication, integrity, and sacrifice. But first, we must address a serious matter regarding professional conduct and the trust we place in each other. The room fell silent. David's head snapped up. In 15 minutes, Sarah's campaign would launch. In 30 minutes, the FBI announcement would hit the news. In 45 minutes, David's carefully constructed victimhood would collapse. I sat straight back at the honoree table, my eyes forward, wearing my dignity like armor. The boy who'd tried to destroy me was about to learn what happened when you attacked someone who'd spent 40 years earning respect, one act of kindness at a time. Dr. Kim's voice carried the authority of someone who'd run hospitals through crises and never flinched. "Before we begin our celebrations, I must address a serious breach of professional conduct that has come to our attention." The room stirred, people glancing around, but I kept my eyes fixed on the podium. Peripheral vision catching David's attempt to stand before his supervisor placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "We've discovered an employee has been inappropriately accessing confidential personnel files, including salary information and retirement portfolios of family members employed here." Dr. Kim's eyes found David across the room. "This is not only a violation of HIPAA and hospital policy, but when used for potential financial exploitation of an elderly parent, it becomes a criminal matter." At exactly 7:30, I felt the buzz of hundreds of phones receiving notifications. Sarah's campaign had launched. The woman next to me gasped, showing her husband her screen. Within seconds, whispers rippled through the room like wildfire. The real Margaret Henderson story was already being shared by the construction workers Michael had mobilized, the church members I'd helped, the food bank volunteers who knew the truth. The website crashed twice in the first 5 minutes from traffic. David's phone was exploding with notifications. His face went from pale to gray as he read what was happening. Jennifer's testimony was particularly devastating. "Margaret Henderson paid for my divorce lawyer when her son cheated on me. She ensured I got fair alimony and helped me restart my life. The toxic one in that family was never Margaret. It was David, who is now trying to steal from the woman who saved me." Dr. Kim continued, her tone now ice cold. "Mr. David Henderson, please stand." David rose on unsteady legs, his designer image crumbling. "Your access to hospital systems shows you've viewed your mother's personnel file 17 times in the past 6 weeks, including her retirement account details and life insurance beneficiaries. You've also accessed the files of 3 other employees who are listed as emergency contacts for elderly parents. Security will escort you out immediately. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately, and criminal charges are being considered. But the real explosion came at 7:45 when phones lit up with the FBI breaking news alert. Life coach Trevor Kane arrested in multi-state elder fraud scheme, 23 victims identified, more expected. The article included a photo of Kane and mentioned that several of his clients were now under investigation for their roles in recruiting others. David's name wasn't mentioned yet, but anyone following the story could connect the dots. As security approached David's table, he made one desperate play. "This is all her manipulation," he shouted, pointing at me. "She's turned everyone against me. This is exactly what toxic mothers do. They play victim when their children try to escape." His voice cracked, the performance falling flat in a room full of people who'd watched me work double shifts, who'd seen me donate my vacation days to colleagues with sick children, who knew exactly who Margaret Henderson was. Then came the twist nobody expected, least of all David. Emma, David's 16-year-old daughter, stood up from where she'd been sitting with Sarah's family. I hadn't known she was coming. Her voice, young but steady, cut through David's rant. "Dad, stop, just stop." The room went silent. Emma walked to the front, her hands shaking but her resolve clear. "Grandma doesn't know I'm doing this, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Dad, you tried to get me to lie about Grandma for your posts. You wanted me to make up stories about her being controlling and manipulative. When I refused, you threatened to cut off my college fund, the one Grandma set up, not you." The room collectively gasped. David's face contorted. "Emma, honey, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Emma continued, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma refinanced her house to pay for my therapy when Mom's insurance wouldn't cover it. She drives 2 hours every week to attend my volleyball games. She's never missed a birthday, never forgotten to call when I'm sick. You're destroying the only person who's been constant in my life for money, and everyone knows it now." At 8 p.m., the local news notification popped up. "Local man connected to FBI elder fraud investigation. Hospital employee terminated for targeting mother's retirement funds." David's viral victim story had been hijacked by a bigger truth. He was the villain in his own narrative. Dr. Kim returned to the podium as security flanked David. "Now let's honor someone who truly deserves recognition. Margaret Henderson, please come forward for your Lifetime Service Award." The room erupted in a standing ovation. 300 people rose to their feet, applauding not just my service, but my survival. As I walked to the podium, I passed David being escorted out. Our eyes met for one brief moment. I saw no recognition of the mother who'd loved him, only rage at being exposed. But behind him, Emma broke free from her aunt's arms and ran to me sobbing. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry for what he did." I held my granddaughter as the room continued its ovation, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than pain. Not vindication, that would come later, but relief. The truth was finally louder than the lie. "This award," Dr. Kim announced, her voice carrying over the applause, "goes to someone who exemplifies not just professional excellence, but personal integrity. Someone who gives without expecting return, who loves without conditions, and who stands with dignity even when facing the unthinkable. Margaret Henderson, this hospital and this community are better because of you." As I accepted the award with Emma still by my side, David's empty chair at the back of the room seemed to echo with the ghost of the son I'd lost long before this public execution. Perhaps he'd never really existed at all. The weeks following the appreciation dinner unfolded with the methodical precision of justice finally being served. David's world collapsed, piece by piece, each fallen domino triggering the next. The FBI investigation revealed he'd recruited 7 elderly parents from our church community into Trevor Kane's scheme, earning $3,500 in commissions. 3 families had already begun the process of public shaming before Kane's arrest halted their plans. David faced federal charges for interstate fraud conspiracy, with each count carrying up to 5 years in prison. His attempt to maintain his victim narrative on social media backfired spectacularly. The internet, which had initially embraced his story of maternal abuse, turned on him with vicious efficiency. The same strangers who'd called me a monster now flooded his pages with accusations of elder abuse, fraud, and manipulation. Someone created a meme of his face with the caption, "When you try to steal your mom's house but end up homeless," which went viral with twice the shares his original post had received. His graphic design clients canceled contracts en masse, one publicly stating, "We cannot work with someone who would defraud his own mother." The legal consequences were swift and severe. The district attorney, already familiar with Trevor Kane's scheme from cases in other jurisdictions, offered David a plea deal: 18 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and mandatory restitution to all victims he'd recruited. His lawyer, no longer being paid since David's accounts were frozen, advised him to take it. The alternative was a trial where Emma would testify against him, where Jennifer would detail his patterns of manipulation, where I would sit in the witness stand and simply tell the truth. But perhaps the most complete destruction was personal. Sarah and Michael formally disowned him through a lawyer's letter, making clear he was no longer welcome at any family gathering. "You killed our mother's spirit for money," Sarah wrote in her final message to him. "You're not our brother anymore. You're just someone we used to know." His own daughter, Emma, chose to live with Jennifer full-time, refusing his calls from jail. The court granted Jennifer sole custody without contest. David couldn't afford a lawyer to fight it. I sold the house 3 months after his arrest. Not because I had to, my finances were secure once Janet helped me restructure everything, but because I needed to. Every room held memories of raising David, and I couldn't heal in a museum of my own betrayal. The sale brought $425,000, more than David had hoped to steal. I used part of it to establish ironclad college funds for all 6 grandchildren, structured so their parents could never access the money. David's share went to Emma, though she wouldn't know about it until she turned 21. The beach cottage I bought in Wilmington was half the size but twice the piece. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen with an ocean view, everything I needed for this new chapter. I returned to full-time nursing at the local hospital where nobody knew my story. My colleagues saw me as Margaret, the experienced nurse who mentored newcomers, not Margaret, the viral victim of a son's greed. The work grounded me, reminded me that I had value beyond being someone's mother. Sundays looked different now. Sarah and her family drove down once a month for beach picnics. Michael brought his construction crew to build me a deck, refusing payment, his way of showing love. Emma visited every other weekend, and we never spoke about David. Instead, we created new traditions. Sunrise walks collecting shells, teaching her to make her great-grandmother's soup, reading together in comfortable silence. She was healing too, from her own betrayal by the father she'd once idolized. The other victims of Trevor Kane's scheme reached out, forming an unexpected support group. We met monthly via video call, sharing our stories of children transformed by greed, finding comfort in knowing we weren't alone. One mother from Arizona said something that stuck with me. "We didn't lose our children. We lost the illusion of who they were. The grief is real, but so is the freedom from trying to love someone incapable of loving us back." 6 months after the arrest, I received a letter from federal prison. David's handwriting, once familiar as my own, seemed foreign now. I held it unopened for 3 days before Janet convinced me to read it with her present. It was exactly what she'd predicted. Not an apology, but another manipulation. He blamed Trevor Kane, mental health issues, financial pressure, everyone but himself. The last paragraph asked if I could put money in his commissary account. I gave the letter to Janet for the permanent restraining order file. I found peace in unexpected places. The food bank in Wilmington welcomed me as a volunteer, not knowing my history. I joined a book club where we read mysteries and drank too much wine. I learned to kayak at 68, something Robert had always wanted us to try. My new neighbor, a retired teacher named Joan, became the friend I didn't know I needed. Someone who knew nothing about David beyond we're estranged, who liked me for who I was now, not who I'd been as a mother. The woman in the mirror looked different these days. Gray hair fully embraced, no longer colored for David's wedding that would never come. Laugh lines deeper, but genuine, earned through survival rather than pretense. I wore my grandmother's wedding ring now instead of my own, a reminder that love could be real, even when it ended badly. The Margaret who'd sobbed on the bathroom floor still existed, but she was layered beneath someone stronger, someone who'd learned that survival sometimes meant accepting that love couldn't fix everything. One morning, exactly 1 year after the viral post, I deleted Facebook, not out of fear or shame, but simply because I didn't need it anymore. The validation of strangers meant nothing. The real people in my life knew where to find me. As the account deactivated, erasing the digital battlefield where my son had tried to destroy me, I felt the last chain break. David had wanted me erased. Instead, I'd been refined, reduced to my essential self, a woman who loved freely, gave generously, and survived magnificently. 1.5 years has passed since my son tried to erase me for money. I'm sitting on my deck this morning, watching the sun paint the ocean gold, holding a cup of coffee in Robert's mug, the one thing I couldn't leave behind. Emma sent me a photo from her high school graduation yesterday. She's valedictorian, headed to nursing school, she says, because she wants to be like me. I cried when I read that, but they were clean tears, not the poisoned grief that once consumed me. The call came last week from David's lawyer. He's being released early for good behavior, needs somewhere to parole to, wonders if his mother might consider. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I simply said, his mother died the day he killed her publicly for money. I'm someone else now, someone who chooses peace over pathology, wisdom over wishful thinking. The lawyer understood. He'd seen this story before, would see it again. Greed wearing the mask of grievance, destroying families for inheritance that would never fill the hollow where love should have lived. I speak at senior centers now, telling my story to rooms full of parents and grandparents who nod with recognition. The patterns are always the same. The adult child who suddenly discovers their trauma after meeting someone who profits from family destruction. The public shaming that precedes the financial grab. The shock of seeing your love story rewritten as abuse. The isolation that follows when strangers believe the performance over the truth. But mostly, I talk about what comes after. The unexpected freedom of losing someone who is already lost. The peace that comes from refusing to fund your own destruction. Last month, a woman approached me after one of these talks, tears streaming down her weathered face. Her daughter had just posted something similar about her, claiming abuse that never happened, demanding money for therapy to heal from a childhood that the woman had photographed extensively. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, all showing a cherished child. "What do I do?" she asked, and I held her hands, steadier now than they'd ever been. "You survive," I told her. "You document everything. You protect yourself legally. You grieve the child you thought you had. And then you live. Not in spite of them, but regardless of them." The food bank where I volunteer now has a program I started. Grandparents Raising Grandchildren After Estrangement. We provide not just food, but legal resources, emotional support, and practical guidance for grandparents who've lost their children to greed, addiction, or manipulation, but are trying to save the grandchildren. Emma helps when she's home from college. Her presence a testament that sometimes the next generation breaks the cycle. She doesn't mention David, and neither do I. He's become a ghost that neither of us needs to acknowledge. A cautionary tale, rather than a current sorrow. Sarah calls every morning at 7 a.m., a ritual that replaced my morning scroll through David's updates. Michael visits every Sunday, bringing his family for beach barbecues that are louder and happier than our old formal dinners. They've both been to therapy to process their brother's betrayal, learning that David's narcissism wasn't their fault, wasn't mine, was possibly always there beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to emerge. We don't set a place for him at the table. We don't leave space for his return. Some bridges once burned provide better service as ashes, reminding us that not every crossing should be rebuilt. The truth about love that David never understood, that Trevor Kane weaponized, that thousands of parents learn too late, is this: love isn't infinite forgiveness. Love isn't enabling someone's worst impulses. Love isn't sacrificing your dignity on the altar of their demands. Sometimes, the most profound act of love is refusing to participate in your own destruction, even when that refusal comes labeled as abandonment, as toxicity, as the very abuse you're being falsely accused of committing. I keep one photo of David on my phone, not the posed family portraits or birthday celebrations, but a candid shot from when he was 5, asleep in the hospital chair beside Robert's bed during one of the cancer treatments. His little hand is stretched out, trying to hold his father's even in sleep. That's the child I mourn, the one who reached for love, who knew what family meant before the world taught him to monetize it. That child deserved better than what he became. But I deserved better too, and it took public humiliation to teach me that truth. My story isn't unique. Elder financial abuse by adult children has increased 400% in the last decade, often starting with social media character assassination. If you're reading this, if you're living this, know that survival is possible. Document everything. Protect yourself legally. Don't negotiate with emotional terrorists, even if they share your DNA. Love yourself enough to say no. Love them enough to refuse to enable their destruction. And remember, you didn't fail as a parent because your child chose greed over gratitude. Some people are just broken in ways that love can't fix. What would you do if your own child publicly destroyed your reputation for money? Would you fight back or fade away? Would you choose survival or sacrifice? Share your thoughts below, and remember, sometimes the greatest love story is the one you write with yourself, when everyone else has closed the book. If you're facing this situation, reach out. You're not alone. The comments are full of survivors who understand that sometimes letting go isn't giving up, it's growing up. It's choosing peace over perpetual war, choosing dignity over degradation, choosing to live the rest of your story without the character who tried to write you out of it. Your love was real, even if theirs wasn't. That's not your failure. It's your freedom.